If you're brand new to CNC routers and you've been hearing this term post-processor and wondering what is a post-processor and why does it keep coming up, in this video I'm going to explain to you what a post-processor is when it comes to designing your CNC router projects and getting that project over to your CNC router to carve out that amazing CNC woodworking project. idcwoodcraft.com. I'm Garrett Fromme, CEO of IDC Woodcraft, a CNC router bit supply company for you and your CNC router. And in this video, I'm going to give you the breakdown of what a post-processor is and how it works. Now, the first thing is, if you are brand new to CNC routers, you really don't have to know exactly how a post-processor works, but you do need to know what it is and how to select the specific post-processor for your machine. The first thing is I want you to understand what a post-processor is. In order to do that, we have to kind of look at the whole CNC router world, designing and getting that thing over to your machine in terms that the bigger picture. So when you design an awesome CNC router project, you design it in your design software. And if you are in the market for or trying to figure out what CNC design software you want to get, I recommend the Vectric VCarve Pro. Down in the description, I will leave links for that and everything I talk about, so you can go straight to their webpage to see exactly what it is. You design your project in your design software, whether it's Vectric VCarve or Spire or CarveCo or Cut2D or any myriad of design software. You design it up in what they call the CAD side of your design software. Once you're finished with the design, you have to generate something called toolpaths. Basically, you have to tell the software what router bits are going to run that part or various parts of your CNC router project. Then you have to write something called G-Code. Now, you don't have to write it, the software writes it for you. But when it comes to that G-Code, there are a lot of CNC routers out there. There's different brands, like the Long Mill MK2 series here. It's one of the CNC routers that I recommend. If you are just getting into it and you haven't picked out a CNC router yet, I have a deep dive video on this and what to be looking for in your CNC router hunt journey. It's called the Ultimate CNC Router Buyer's Guide. I'll put a link to that video down below as well. But when you have that toolpath laid out, you have to create the G-code, and then that G-code is what tells your router what to do. It's kind of like its own language, right? You tell the software, I'm going to have the machine carve out just however you tell it to carve it out with what router bits, and then it has to generate the code that the machine understands. And what I mean by that is the G-code is basically what tells the router how to move around and how fast to move, among other things, such as turning the spindle on, turning the spindle off, which in the case of the Long Mill CNC router or some other CNC routers that have trim routers on them, that's not necessary. It's when you have a spindle that you need to tell it to turn on and off. But the G-code needs to tell the router when to turn that spindle on and off. That's just one example. There's lots of things that go into that G-code that tells the CNC router exactly what to do and how to do it, along with some underlying rules. So it comes to the point of writing that G-code that the software writes, where the post-processor comes into play. The post-processor is a program that says to the software, as you are writing this G-code, there are certain elements that you have to put into that code so that me, as the CNC router, understands it, will know what to do. Basically, all CNC routers have a brain, such as the Long Mill MK2 has this black box here. That's the brain of the machine. And in there are requirements, so the machine knows how to run. And those requirements are the G-code itself. The post-processor tells the G-code writer of the software to insert certain commands at certain places so that the machine knows exactly what to do and where to go during different processes. For example, spindle. I told you the spindle. In some cases in machining, like metal machining, there is coolant. So we have to be able to turn the coolant on and turn the coolant off. So a post-processor is basically the gatekeeper of how the G-code is going to be generated from your design software. Now, let's paint this picture a little bit more clearly. There are many, many CNC routers that are out there. There's some basic desktop units. There are benchtop units like the Longmill MK2. There are industrial units like the one I have over here, the Phantom 4x4 CNC router. And each one of those requires certain types of commands in that G-code. So this is why we need a post-processor. The post-processor is a filter that says, this is what's required to run this machine. So as the G-code is being written, it passes through the post-processor, and the post-processor writes in the code, the specifics for that machine. Now, you don't really need to know about a post-processor, how it works and what it does. But what you do need to know is how to make sure that when you're telling your design software, the CAM side of it, like in the Vectric design software, you need to tell it that this is the machine it's writing for. And so you're picking your post-processor from a list. So just to reiterate, before we get into the design software, the post-processor is a little program that the G-code passes through to be written. So on one side, the software is writing the G-code, is passing it through the post-processor, and on the other end, you now have a G-code file that you will load into your control software for your CNC router. Now, control software is your interface with your CNC router, whether it's the Longmill MK2 or any other machine. It's where you're looking on your computer or on a touchpad, iPad, whatever, and you're watching your CNC router and you're able to manipulate the machine through the control software. Now, control software is what actually tells your CNC router what to do. For example, in the Longmill CNC router, you want to use a control software called G-Sender, or for most benchtop CNC routers, G-Sender is the software that you want to use. Suffice it to say that the G-code is written from the design software, the CAM side of it, passes through the post-processor, the code is now written, and then you take that code and you plug it into your control software, such as G-Sender, and then you press the start button after you've set up your CNC router, and it'll start carving your project. So let's dive into the Vectric software, and I'll show you exactly where I set up the post-processor and how to set it up properly for your CNC router. We are now in the Vectric design software, and I can show you where the toolpath post-processor setup is in this software. If you are using something like Fusion 360 or Carveco or some other software, I'm not really sure where it's at, but the concepts are all going to be the same. So right now we have a project that's a tree carving. And so I am going to switch to the 3D view, and you notice we've got a bunch of blue here and red lines. Now what that is indicating are the tool paths that I had already set up. In other words, it's the motion that the CNC router bit is going to be taking along its path. Now you notice there are some red lines, such as here, that's coming up from the corner, and then there's a lot of little blue lines in here. The difference is the red lines are the rapid motions of the router bit as it's moving into position, and then the blue lines are the carving speed at which it's going to be doing that work. Now there's other color-coded lines as well. You can see right there's a bit of a cyan line on the thing. That's another part of a toolpath. But for all intents and purposes, we just want to know how to set the post-processor up correctly. So I'm first going to generate this toolpath so you see how cool this tree project is. So I'm going to tell the Vectric software to preview the visible toolpaths. And there it is. It's carved the leaves on the tree and the tree itself, and I've used some color in order to make it stand out in the software. Now, in the Vectric software, I want you to look to the menu on the screen. And I'm going to close it to get to the main toolpath menu. And we know we are on toolpath menu when it says toolpaths up top. So now what we need to do is save the G-code. But first of all, we have to tell the software exactly what toolpaths we are going to run. If you look down at the lower left, there are about 8 different toolpaths highlighted. So we have to check the ones that we want. And I want the ones that's just specific to the tree and the leaves. And so I've clicked them and made them visible, and you can see now we have all those blue lines and red lines again. In the Vectric software, we have this little save button right there where it says save toolpath. When you select that, you open yourself up into the function, the CAM function that's going to write the G-code. But it needs to have the post processor in place in order to get permission to write the G-code, as well as to know how that code needs to be written. So you will always find in your where you're going to generate your G-code a place where you can select your post processor. So in the Vectric area, if you go about midway down the page, you see it says post processor. And I currently have a post processor selected that says GRBL and in parentheses inch and then *.G-code. That *.G-code, the G-code is the file extension that's going to be applied to the G-code file that is going to be generated. But we need to make sure we have the right post processor. I know that this post processor, the GRBL inch, is good for the long mill series CNC routers. But let's say you have a different CNC router, like a ShopBot or a Laguna. Well, when I click this box, it opens up and there are several post processors in this list. And I don't see the Laguna on this list. So I need to see if I can go find it in the Vectric software. Your software should have most of the post processors for common machines, but you will not always find them there. But what we're going to do is we're going to go find that. And in the Vectric software, at the top of this little opened up menu, it says add post processors. When you click that, we're going to open up a dialog box. And in this dialog box, you can type in some information up here, but we need to find your post processor first. So in order to do that in the Vectric software, you come down to this little white box that has the post processors that I have populated in my quick pick selection, and we want to add the Laguna to it. So what we're going to do is come to this plus button. And you select that, and now we have a whole list of post processors that have been given to the Vectric design company, and they have imported them into the Vectric software. Again, if yours is not here, if you do not see your machine here, then you will need to contact your machine maker and ask them how to set it up. But first we're going to find the post processor that we want. So here's a whole list of Laguna machines right here. And let's just say we have the Laguna Swift Cut 3D, which is this one. So this is cutting in millimeters, and we're working in metric, we'll just pretend. So that's the one that we want. If you look at it, the Laguna Swift, I'm just seeing if they've got one for another machine, for the Swift Cut 3D in inches. And I'm not seeing it here. Maybe up above, but okay, let's just say it's not. But I want you to look at this right here. It says Laguna combination arc ATC. This is a really important time that you need to have your post processor set right. ATC stands for automatic tool changer. If your machine has an automatic tool changer, you need to have the G-code for that tool changer. So let's just pretend our machine has it for the tool changer. So we're going to select that, and then down at the bottom, click select. And now in our little list down here, we have the Laguna ATC processor in our list. Now we just simply say OK, and now we're going to go over to our post processor list and open that up. And there is the Laguna ATC. So we select that, and now what we Now all we have to do is tell the software to generate the toolpath. But we've got a little bit of an error here. I'm not going to go into the errors, but if you need to have that resolved, right, then that's a little bit more advanced. The reason we're getting an error here is because it's an ATC, or automatic tool changer function, and I don't have my settings quite right. For you as a CNC router owner with a benchtop machine like the Longmill MK2, this is not going to account to you. So we're going to select another post processor. Let's just say we have we'll go to the G-Code arcs and the millimeters one. This one that I have highlighted here. Now I'm going to run that on the Phantom CNC router. That's the one I want to use. If I want to run it on the Longmill CNC router, I need to use the GRBL inch post processor. It all depends on your machine. Now, you as a one machine owner will only have one item in this list. So don't worry about having a multitude of items in here. You don't need it. With one CNC router, you just need the right one. But now that we've got the right post processor selected, all we do is say save toolpath. Now I'm going to use the arcs millimeter, and we're going to click the save toolpath, and then we tell it where it's going to go. I'm going to put it in downloads, and I'm just going to call this test G-Code and click save. Now if I go to the directory, the downloads directory, that file is going to be right here. Now you notice there's two of them, and that's because there are two different router bits being used, and I have to manually change the router bits. But we'll discuss that in another video. Right now this is just about the post processor, and here are the results of what it does. I'm going to double click that file and open it up in Notepad, and now we're going to look at the Notepad file, and you notice up here it says T1 M6 G17, and then it moves on to other stuff. So these codes right here is what the post processor needed to insert, along with this long number there. That's also part of the post processor. Now this is not a very complicated G-code, but this is what a post processor does. It punches in these types of numbers so that the CNC router knows exactly what to do. Just to reiterate one more time for you as a brand new CNC router owner about this post processor, what it is and what it does. When you design your project, you design it in the CAD side, or computer-aided design side of your software. And that's where you're drawing the lines and you're putting words and what have you. Then you take it over to the CAM side of your design software. And that's where you're generating what they call toolpaths. And toolpaths are telling the software what router bits you want to do what and when. And when you're done, you tell the software, the CAM side, to generate the G-code. The G-code is the language that your CNC router understands that tells the router exactly what to do, when to do it, how to move, when to stop, things like that. The G-code needs to have certain formats in it, or certain other codes that tell the machine that it should be doing certain things or get ready to do certain things. An excellent example is if you run in millimeters or in inches. There is a G-code that has to be inserted to tell the router that we are running in inches or millimeters. And that's the job of the post processor. Once the G-code has passed through the post processor and the post processor has inserted the necessary codes into that G-code, it comes out the other side written the right way for your CNC router. Well, for example, the Longmill MK2 here, or whatever you have. And from there, you take that G-code and you put it into your control software, and the machine, you hit the start button and the machine starts doing what you want it to do to carve that amazing CNC router woodworking project. You don't have to understand how a post processor works. You just need to know that you have to have it. Now, in the rare cases that your machine does not have a post processor attached to the Vectric software, then what you want to do is contact your machine maker and say, we need a post-processor for this machine. And they will send that to you. It's a very small program, just a set of rules, basically. If this video is helpful, give me a thumbs up and a comment down below. Questions about post-processors, or if you know something else about that that I forgot to mention, I would certainly appreciate comments so that other people can learn from you and your knowledge. idcwoodcraft.com